It's always interesting whenever a title and the opening of a series presents a concept and then quickly kind of just leaves it behind. And I really do think that's kind of something that happens with Ranking of Kings, though at face value, this is something that over time, as again, we've kind of left this concept behind, that at some point I realized it was never left behind. And I'm really curious as to how this show itself and the story can really kind of tie things back together. Before we get started, I want to present a theory that I have kind of brewing in my head, but I do want to make two things perfectly clear. On one hand, I am only watching the anime, so everything that I'm presenting here is based on my observations in the anime only. I am not reading the manga. I have not read the manga. Two, I'm presenting these as a theory for anime watchers. So if you are a manga reader, you're perfectly fine watching this video, not that I could stop you, but I'm not asking for answers. Please do not go in the comments and spoil things for both myself and other people that are watching this that have not read the manga. Again, this is me having fun theorizing on the anime alone and what's to come, not necessarily that I want to know what actually happens. The mystery is there for a reason, and I'm really enjoying that mystery. So with that said, let me jump into my crazy theory that has been brewing in my mind for some time. I have been kind of hinting at some of these theories in my episode-by-episode impressions. I hope that if you're watching the series as well, that you'll be checking those out in the future. But with all that said, let's jump right into it. As I alluded to earlier, obviously the show itself is called Ranking of Kings. And the concept of the Ranking of Kings is a system that essentially all these kingdoms are battling each other for supremacy in this particular ranking system. And they're all kind of being judged by this one central system. And we've had a couple tellings of exactly how that works. Bose specifically, who was the king of this kingdom that we're kind of focused on, despite the fact of him being extremely powerful, very strong, and having a good heart, they note that he's never won the Ranking of Kings system. They kind of specify that if it was based on strength alone, he would win. There's multiple categories to this Ranking of Kings system as to what really kind of specifies which one is the best. There's emphasis on strength, leadership, the bonds that they have with the people, and how much they respect their king. All these different things really tells who is the actual winner. But we don't really get much other thoughts around the Ranking of Kings system besides two other elements. One scene specifically is where Appius is kind of escorting this guy who is a part of the Ranking of Kings system who's coming to check on Daida. And Appius specifically mentions the idea that there's this rumor of this one treasure. The people that win the Ranking of Kings system, a lot of them choose this one treasure within this vault because that's their choice. They get to choose something in this treasure vault, and they always seem to choose this one thing. But then Appius mentions the idea that they immediately go mad. Now again, jump forward, and it seems like we completely leave behind the Ranking of Kings system. There's so much focus on Boji and his attempted assassination, and then it jumps right into them basically having to retake the castle from Daida, who is basically Bose, and this influx of criminals that come in from the underworld, and Miranjo and her plot. Everything seems to kind of throw away the Ranking of Kings system, and the focus is not on that anymore. Now, granted, the assumption there is that with all this happening, that it's basically a way of building Boji as a character, and for us to realize at some point, oh yeah, everybody now supports Boji, the one that was never supported before. Now they've gone through all this crazy stuff, they realize how special Boji is, and obviously he should be king, and then we can go right into the Ranking of Kings system. That was my assumption. That was my assumption that this whole plot line, yes, it's developed characters, but in the sense to the Ranking of Kings system itself, this was a way to put Boji on a pedestal and make people start following him through this adversity. But then there was two other aspects that were being sprinkled throughout all these episodes that made me realize there's something else here. There's another thread here in my theory that is going to tie into this Ranking of Kings system. That's immortality and the gods. So let's get into the gods first, because that's a simpler concept here. And this is something that we kind of built into through Bose's backstory with Miranjo. I realized here recently that through all the backstory that we hear about Bose and Miranjo and all the kingdoms and their fighting, and this idea that the gods are going around and taking over lands and putting, you know, basically humans under their control, at some point it mentions the idea that the mages started rising up and they fought back against the gods. Well, something very interesting happened in one of the later backstories, and that was this point in which we get to see the perspective of the gods, which is kind of weird because technically if they're telling a backstory, How would they know what the gods are saying? But it's trying to point out something specific that happened at that time. In this conversation, one of them is going, should we go hunt down the remaining of the mages? And he said, no, it's not important right now. They're finished. Don't worry about that. We have to find a way to survive. Like, they're pointing out this idea that these people knew that if they took on arms, learned magic, they will be able to take us down. So we have to find a way of stopping this from happening again. And I think that was the birth of the ranking and king system, because nothing before then mentions the ranking and king system. It's really hard to get a tell because they never specify like this is, the year 200 or something like that. But the assumption is that that's the point in my head that the ranking and king system was developed. It was developed by the gods to keep the people under their control, not by a strong arm, not to go out and take over all the lands. No, instead, it's a clever way of controlling the people by making them compete against each other, offering up these godly rewards if all these kingdoms will fight each other. And what's the best way to get to the heart of a king or queen? Treasures. Treasures that you can't find anywhere. These queens and kings that have everything and all the gold they want, but then there's these treasures that you can't buy with gold. And that's an easy way to get to their heart and make them compete against each other for supremacy. And then that takes away the attention from the gods. They're able to basically puppeteer battles between humankind, so they never have to worry about the humankind coming after them. And now getting to my second thing, and this ties in with that, immortality. The immortality aspect has kind of been hinted at throughout the entire series. This concept of somebody having immortality and that basically polluting their minds. This is a concept that was solidified through Desher. Desher talking about Oaken, and specifically Moranjo. This idea that the reason that Oaken is so corrupted and he's so crazy is because he has immortality and that corrupts the mind. And additionally, he wants to go after Moranjo because it kind of equates that to her as well, because her spirit's inside of a mirror. She's not necessarily dead. And so, it hints at other stuff as well. Don't get me wrong. I know that there's a whole reason behind the reason why he wants to take her down. She's done these horrible things and he wants to destroy her. But the main thing we're talking about here is specifically the immortality. And that's the important thing that goes into my whole theory here, is that whenever somebody gains immortality in this world, it seems like it corrupts their mind. Obviously, the idea that you are never going to die is going to pollute how you treasure things around you. You no longer have this desire to, again, procreate or anything like that. All the things that normally drive human beings is lost because the mortal coil is no longer there. But then you ask, Andrew, how does that tie in with the ranking and king system? My theory is that the treasure that everybody chooses from the ranking and king system is immortality. And that immortality is there for a reason. And the reason why I come to this conclusion is a specific person named Kingbo. Well, technically his father. Remember a while back when we first had these criminals come from the underworld to the kingdom? One of them was Kingbo. And Kingbo specifically has this whole story about his past and his father going crazy. He was this great king, and at some point he just went crazy and started killing everybody and ran away. And of course we immediately knew who that was. That was the king that Boji ran into while he was journeying with Hokuro and Domas. At some point he fell down a pit, he ended up running into some crazy guy in a cave who's clucking like a chicken and doing ceremonies, and eventually he wanted to sacrifice Boji, so Boji ran away. Again, all signs point to that being Kingbo's father, who was this king that went mad. Why did he go mad? Well, he gained immortality. Again, going back to Oppius's mention, the idea that everybody that wins the Ranking of Kings gets this one mysterious treasure, and then they go crazy. It's immortality. It has to be immortality. That's the only thing they're really hitting heavy on right now with this series that causes people to go crazy is immortality. Now the question is why is immortality the treasure? Why would the gods have the Ranking of Kings system to offer up people to immortality? And it's not too shocking to realize that if immortality is in this treasure room, every king and queen is going to choose that. That is the one thing, again, that kings and queens cannot gain. They can gain all the wealth, control, power. They have it all, but they still are mortal. The one thing they cannot beat is their own mortality. And so obviously all of them are going to choose that. And then it goes back to the seemingly the rules of this world is that anybody that gets mortality goes crazy. And of course you would question why would they want to give the kings and queens immortality, but I figured that is a sort of reset. As these kings and queens are competing against each other, they're getting stronger and stronger, and then at some point it needs a reset. And I believe that immortality is a way to drive them crazy in order for their kingdom to fall, and then we'd have a reset happen, and then the kingdoms would compete again, one would become the strongest, and then again, get that treasure and a reset. It's a way of keeping them from getting too powerful. So again, the whole ranking a king system has not gone to the wayside. It is not something they have left behind way back here. The writer has been sprinkling a story connection throughout this. They're weaving these little points in that eventually when they start, putting it at the forefront, you'll realize, oh yeah, by the way, it's been kind of getting into that this whole time. Now, this gets into my crazy theory. This gets into, I think, where things can go in the future. I've talked about how they started. I've talked about how it seems to be like they've interwoven this idea of the immortality and, again, the possibility of that being the treasure that everybody chooses. But there's one other thread that kind of just is implanted in my brain that I do want to get out as well. And that is, I believe that Oaken was a test subject. Again, this goes back to my issue with not really knowing exactly how much time has spanned through all these different backstories. We don't really know how long ago it was that Desher, Desper, and Oaken fought against their father. But again, I can assume that it happened before the ranking a king system was even a thing because there's no mention of it. But even then, their father was looking for immortality. But at some point, they mentioned the idea that Oaken never had power. And then after they failed their father, later on, Oaken became immortal. And then it drove him mad, of course, like everything else. I don't know how they're going to present it, but my theory is that at some point, Oaken was seen by some god, and they wanted to test out the theory of somebody becoming corrupted by this. What is the thing they hit so heavy on with Oaken? He was a chivalrous man. He was a good man. He wanted so badly to basically raise an army of men that were all just and good people. And what better person to test the idea that somebody can become corrupted by immortality than Oaken himself? And again, I think that's going to be something they're going to tie in with future stories, is how are you going to have at some point them rise up against the gods again? Is that realization, at least from Desher's side, that the reason his brother is corrupted and the way that he is because of the gods. And that's going to lead him to want to rise up against them. The whole underworld, for the sake of his brother, will rise up to go fight up against them. But there you have it. That's my crazy theory right now. The idea that the ranking a king system has always been present in the story, and my belief that the ranking a king's treasure, the one thing that everybody chooses, is immortality, and it drives them all mad. Just based on pretty much how everything's been sprinkled throughout the story. But let me know in the comments down below. Let me know if, do you agree, disagree? Is this a theory that you think is on board? Again, if you know the manga, you know the story, please don't spoil things. Please just don't even say, man, you're right on point, or man, you're pretty close, or anything. I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything. But anyways, that's my whole theory. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below, comment. Again, let me know what you thought. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon or through our tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody does. And if you're a fan of anime, definitely join our Discord down that link as well. We'd love to hear from you, and y'all take care.